At dinner, my daughter said, "You're just another mouth to feed. I can't stand spending money on your meds anymore." No one defended me. On Monday, I sold the house and everything I owned. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought my own daughter would see me as nothing more than a financial burden. Yet there I was, sitting at the dinner table in Isla's home, when those words cut through me like a knife. "You're just another mouth to feed, Mom. I can't stand spending more money on your medications." The dining room fell silent. My son-in-law Trevor stared down at his plate, suddenly very interested in his mashed potatoes. My teenage grandson Kyle kept his eyes fixed on his phone. No one spoke up. No one defended me. I sat there, my hands trembling slightly as I set down my fork. At 67, I never expected to be living with my daughter. After my mild stroke 2 years ago, Isla had insisted I move in with them. "It's safer this way," she'd said. "We can take care of you." What she meant, I now realized, was that she could control me. "Isla," I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I contribute to this household. My Social Security barely covers your medications," she interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "Do you have any idea how expensive they are? And the special foods your doctor recommended? We're drowning here, Mom." Trevor cleared his throat. "Maybe we should discuss this later," he suggested weakly, glancing nervously between his wife and me. "No, we should discuss it now," Isla insisted, her voice rising. "Kyle needs braces. The roof needs repairs. We're putting off so many things because we're spending money on Mom's care." I looked at my grandson, hoping to find some compassion in his young face, but he simply excused himself and left the table. The betrayal stung worse than any physical pain I'd experienced. "I never asked to be a burden," I said softly. "Well, you are one," Isla replied sharply, then seemed to catch herself. Her expression softened slightly. "I'm just stressed about money, Mom. You know I love having you here." But I knew the truth now. I'd seen it in her eyes, heard it in her voice. To my own daughter, I was nothing but a financial liability. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the small guest room that had become mine, staring at the ceiling, remembering the home I'd once owned. The beautiful 3-bedroom house where I'd raised Isla after her father died. The home I still owned, sitting empty because Isla convinced me it was too much for you to manage, Mom. By morning, I'd made my decision. I dressed carefully, putting on my good blue dress and my pearl earrings, the ones my late husband had given me on our 20th anniversary. I did my makeup meticulously, determined to look like the capable woman I still was, not the burden my daughter saw. "You're dressed up," Isla commented when I came down for breakfast. Her tone was suspicious. "I have an appointment," I replied, calmly. "With who?" "Your doctor. I don't remember scheduling anything." There it was again. The assumption that I couldn't manage my own affairs, that she needed to schedule my life for me. "Not a doctor," I said. "A real estate agent." Isla's coffee cup froze midway to her lips. "A what?" "I'm going to sell my house," I stated, my voice stronger than it had been in months. "Your house? But Mom, we talked about this. You can't live alone anymore." "I know," I replied, picking up my purse. "But I don't need to keep an empty house either, especially when I'm such a financial burden to you." Her face flushed. "Mom, about last night. I was just stressed. I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," I interrupted gently. "And it's okay. You have your own family to worry about. I understand that now. But the house, we were thinking maybe Kyle could use it for college in a few years. It's so close to the university and—" I almost laughed. "So that was the plan all along. Keep Mother tucked away in the guest room while waiting for the perfect moment to claim her house. I've made up my mind, Isla. The appointment is at 10. As I walked out the door, I heard Isla frantically calling Trevor. I knew she would try to stop me. They had plans for my house, plans that didn't include considering what I wanted or needed. But for the first time in 2 years, I felt a sense of control returning. The weight on my chest eased slightly as I got into the taxi I'd called. At the real estate office, I sat tall in my chair as the agent, a kind woman named Patricia, laid out the current market value of my home. When I saw the number, I nearly gasped. The neighborhood had appreciated considerably since I'd moved out. My house, the one I'd kept immaculately maintained for decades, the one Isla thought would make a perfect college crash pad for Kyle, was worth far more than I'd imagined. "Are you all right, Mrs. Wilson?" Patricia asked, noticing my expression. I smiled, truly smiled, for the first time since that devastating dinner. "Yes," I replied. "I believe I am." By the time I returned to Isla's house, my phone had 17 missed calls. As I stepped through the front door, I knew the real battle was just beginning. But I also knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never again allow myself to be just another mouth to feed. The moment I stepped back into Isla's house, I could feel the tension. Trevor was pacing in the living room and Isla rushed toward me, her face flushed with anger and panic. "What were you thinking?" she demanded. "You can't just make decisions like this without consulting us." I set my purse down calmly. "I don't need to consult anyone about selling my own property, Isla." "But Mom, you're not—" She stopped herself, but I knew what she was about to say. "Not capable. Not in your right mind. Not smart enough to handle your own affairs." "Not what?" I challenged, my voice quiet but firm. Trevor stepped in, always the mediator. "Norma, we're just concerned. It's a big decision, and with your health. Issues?" "My health is fine," I interrupted. "The stroke was 2 years ago, and my doctor says I'm doing well. I take my medication, I exercise, and my mind is perfectly clear." "That's not the point," Isla said, throwing her hands up. "The point is that we're family, and we make decisions together. That house has been in our family for decades. You can't just sell it on a whim because you got your feelings hurt at dinner." My feelings hurt, as if I were a child who'd been told I couldn't have dessert. "Patricia, that's my real estate agent, says the house could sell for nearly twice what we thought," I said, changing the subject. "The neighborhood has become quite desirable." I watched as Isla and Trevor exchanged a quick glance. Something passed between them. Surprise, calculation, interest. That's great, Mom," Isla said, her tone softening. "All the more reason to think carefully about this. Maybe we could rent it out instead. That would give you income without losing the property." I shook my head. "I've made up my mind." That night, as I lay in bed, memories flooded back. I remembered buying that house with Harold, my late husband. How proud we'd been of our little starter home, with its small backyard, where Isla would eventually take her first steps. After Harold died of a heart attack when Isla was only 8, I'd somehow managed to keep that house, working 2 jobs while raising our daughter alone. I remembered the sacrifices, skipping lunch so Isla could have new school clothes, postponing, home repairs so she could take dance lessons, giving up my dream of going back to college so she could attend the university of her choice. I'd put everything I had into giving Isla a good life, into making sure she never felt the absence of her father too keenly. When had she started seeing me as a burden? When had my value in her eyes diminished to nothing more than the cost of my heart medication? The next morning, I was up early. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my notebook, making lists and calculations. My Social Security wasn't much, but combined with the proceeds from selling the house, I could support myself comfortably for many years. "You're up early," Trevor said, startling me as he entered the kitchen. He poured himself coffee and sat across from me, his expression serious. "Isla's really upset, you know." "I know," I replied, closing my notebook. He sighed. "Look, Norma, I understand you're hurt. What Isla said it wasn't right. But she's under a lot of pressure. The mortgage, Kyle's college fund, my job isn't as secure as it used to be. I understand pressure, Trevor, I said quietly. I raised Isla on a teacher's aide salary after her father died. I never once complained about the cost of raising her. He had the decency to look embarrassed. I know, we were counting on that house, Norma. And there it was. The truth, finally spoken aloud. For what? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Trevor stared into his coffee. We've been having some financial issues. We thought maybe we could take out a home equity loan on your place, just until things stabilize. Isla didn't want to worry you with it. No, she just wanted to control my assets while treating me like an unwelcome guest. I'm sorry about your financial troubles, I said sincerely. But I need to take care of my own future. Later that day, I visited my doctor for a routine checkup. As Dr. Reynolds checked my blood pressure, I asked the question that had been bothering me. Are my medications really as expensive as my daughter claims? She says they're draining her finances. Dr. Reynolds frowned, looking confused. Your prescriptions are all generics, Mrs. Wilson. With your Medicare Part D coverage, they shouldn't cost more than $30 a month total. I felt a chill run through me. $30 a month. That was the financial burden Isla had been complaining about. Is something wrong? Dr. Reynolds asked, noticing my expression. Just realizing some truths, I replied. When I returned to Isla's house, I decided to look through my medication bottles. They were kept in a kitchen cabinet. So I can manage your refills, Isla had insisted. But as I examined them, I noticed something odd. The labels had been switched to generic bottles, with handwritten instructions. I called the pharmacy, pretending I needed information about a refill. When I gave them my name, the pharmacist confirmed my suspicion. Isla had been picking up my medications for months, but the insurance copay was minimal. Where was the rest of my Social Security money going? I'd been giving Isla fun $200 each month to contribute to the household and cover my medical expenses. I'd trusted her completely. That evening, as I sat in the backyard watching the sunset, Kyle came and sat beside me. My grandson was 16, caught in that awkward phase between boy and man, usually too busy with his phone to talk much. Are you really selling your house, Grandma? He asked. Yes, I am. He nodded, fiddling with a loose thread on his jeans. Mom's really mad. I heard her and Dad arguing about it last night. I'm sorry about that, he shrugged. It's not your fault. Mom's always stressed about money. He hesitated, then added, even though Dad makes good money, and they just bought that new SUV last month. A new SUV? They hadn't mentioned that. Kyle. Honey, I said carefully, do you know if your parents have plans for my house? Have they talked about it before? He looked uncomfortable. Yeah, kind of. Mom said once the house was hers, they could sell it and use the money to buy a vacation cabin at the lake. She's been looking at listings for months. My heart sank. So, that was the plan all along. Wait for me to die, or become incompetent enough to control, and then sell my home for a vacation property. As Kyle went back inside, I realized I'd been right to trust my instincts. This wasn't just about finding my independence again. It was about protecting myself from the people who should have been protecting me. The real estate agent called the next morning with news. She already had 3 interested buyers who wanted to view the house. The market was hot, and my well-maintained, mid-century home in a desirable neighborhood wouldn't last long. As I hung up the phone, I caught Isla watching me from the doorway, her expression unreadable. So you're really going through with this, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I replied simply. I am. The morning after my conversation with Kyle, I woke to shouting downstairs. I recognized Isla's voice immediately, sharp with anger. I dressed quickly and made my way down the hallway, stopping just short of the staircase. "How could you let this happen?" Isla was yelling at Trevor. "You're supposed to be keeping an eye on her finances." I tried, Isla. "But your mother isn't. Incompetent. She has every right to sell her own property. We had plans for that money." Isla's voice cracked with frustration. "The lake house, Kyle's college, our retirement, everything we've been working toward." "Everything we've been working toward?" Trevor interrupted. "That's your mother's house, Isla, not ours. We never should have counted on it." Their voices lowered, and I couldn't make out the rest of the conversation. I stood frozen in the hallway, a strange numbness spreading through me. They had been planning my financial future without me, counting on my assets as if they were already theirs. I returned to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process what I'd just heard. My own daughter had been waiting to claim my home, my biggest asset, the one thing I had that could secure my independence, while treating me like an unwelcome guest in her house. Later that morning, as I sipped tea in the kitchen, Idla approached me with a forced smile. Her eyes were puffy, as if she'd been crying. "Mom, I think we need to talk about this house situation." I set down my cup. "What about it?" "I've been doing some research," she said, sitting across from me. "There are concerns about your capacity to make major financial decisions after your stroke." My heart began to pound. "What are you saying, Isla?" "I'm saying that we might need to consider a guardianship arrangement." Her voice was gentle, but her eyes were cold and determined. "Just to protect you from making hasty decisions you might regret." The threat was clear. If I didn't back down about selling my house, my daughter would try to have me declared incompetent. "I had a mild stroke 2 years ago," I said evenly. "Dr. Reynolds has confirmed repeatedly that my cognitive function is normal." "Cognitive decline can be subtle, Mom. You might not even realize—" "Stop!" My voice was sharper than I intended. "I know exactly what you're doing, and it won't work." Isla's expression hardened. "I'm trying to protect you." "No," I said quietly. "You're trying to protect your inheritance." The mask of concern slipped completely from her face. "Do you have any idea how much we've sacrificed to take care of you? The vacations we've postponed, the renovations we've put off? And now you want to sell the one asset that could make up for all that?" "I never asked you to postpone anything for me," I replied. "In fact, Kyle mentioned your new SUV. That doesn't sound like a family making sacrifices." Isla flushed. "That's different. We needed a reliable vehicle, and I need security for my future." She stood abruptly. "Fine. Sell the house, but don't expect us to keep supporting you when you've blown through that money." After she stormed out, I sat at the kitchen table, my hands trembling slightly. I needed help. Someone who could advise me legally and protect me from Isla's threats. I thought of my old friend Judith, who had retired from her law practice a few years ago. We'd lost touch after I moved in with Isla, who had always claimed Judith was a bad influence, who encouraged my independence too much. Now I understood why. I found Judith's number in my old address book and called from the landline while Isla was out running errands. "Norma?" Judith sounded delighted. "It's been ages. How are you?" "I need your help, Judith," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "My daughter, she's trying to control my finances. She's threatening guardianship to stop me from selling my house." Judith's warm tone turned serious. "Tell me everything." And I did. The dinner conversation, the discovery about my medications, the overheard argument, and this morning's threat. Judith listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of dismay. "This is elder financial abuse, Norma," she said when I finished. "And emotional abuse as well. You need to protect yourself." "How? If she files for guardianship—" "She won't win," Judith said firmly. "Not if you're proactive. You need a cognitive assessment from your doctor, And you need to secure your important documents. Can you get out of the house for a few hours tomorrow? I told her I could, and we made a plan to meet at her home. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't alone in this fight. That evening, as I was helping Kyle with his history homework, he asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Grandma, are you and Mom fighting because of the money?" I looked at him, surprised. "What money, sweetheart?" He fidgeted with his pencil. "I heard Mom telling Dad that you get almost $3,000 a month from Social Security and Grandpa's pension. But you only give them $1,200. I felt a chill run through me. "That's right. The rest goes into my savings account." Kyle nodded. "Mom says that's selfish because they do everything for you." "But," he hesitated, then continued in a rush, "I don't think they do that much. You cook dinner most nights and you do your own laundry, and you even drive yourself to your appointments most of the time." I reached out and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for telling me this, Kyle." "Are you mad at Mom?" he asked quietly. "I'm disappointed," I admitted. "But mostly I'm sad that she sees me as a burden instead of as her mother." Kyle looked troubled. "Mom says if you sell your house, you'll waste all the money and then come crawling back when you're broke." I felt a surge of indignation. "I raised your mother by myself after your grandfather died. I put her through college. I've never been irresponsible with money in my life." "I know," Kyle said simply. "That's what Dad said too." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Isla's threat of guardianship and wondering how my sweet little girl had grown into someone who would try to control her own mother for financial gain. Had I spoiled her too much? Had I failed to teach her compassion? The next morning, I slipped out early to meet Judith. She lived in a small but elegant condo downtown, and seeing her familiar face at the door, lined with more wrinkles than I, remembered but still warm and sharp-eyed, brought tears to my eyes. "Oh, Norma," she said, pulling me into a hug. "We'll sort this out, I promise." Inside, she had coffee waiting and a notepad ready. For the next 2 hours, we developed a plan to protect my assets and my autonomy. Judith had called in a favor from a former colleague who specialized in elder law. She'd also contacted Dr. Reynolds, who agreed to provide a formal assessment of my cognitive capacity. "The most important thing," Judith said, "is to move quickly before Isla can file for guardianship. Once you have the proceeds from your house sale, you need to protect that money in a way she can't access." As I left Judith's condo, I felt both stronger and sadder. I had a plan now, a way forward. But I'd also lost something precious. The illusion that my daughter loved me unconditionally. That family meant protection rather than exploitation. My phone buzzed with a text from Isla. "Where are you? We need to talk." I took a deep breath and headed back to a house that no longer felt anything like home. When I returned to Isla's house, Trevor's car was in the driveway alongside an unfamiliar sedan. My stomach knotted as I let myself in through the front door. Voices drifted from the dining room, Isla's tense and insistent, a man's smooth and professional. I stepped into the doorway and froze. Isla and Trevor sat at the table with a man in a charcoal suit who was shuffling through papers. They all looked up when I entered. "There you are," Isla said, her smile tight and artificial. "Mom, this is Mr. Donovan. He's a family attorney who specializes in elder care issues." The pieces clicked into place immediately. Isla hadn't wasted any time. "I see," I said calmly, setting my purse on the sideboard. "And why is a family attorney here, Isla?" Mr. Donovan stood and extended his hand. "Mrs. Wilson, your daughter is concerned about some recent decisions you've been making. She asked me to discuss options for ensuring your financial security." I didn't take his hand. "My financial security is precisely what I'm trying to ensure by selling my house, Mr. Donovan." Isla jumped in quickly. "Mom's had some cognitive issues since her stroke. She gets confused about money sometimes." The lie. was so blatant, so calculated that for a moment I couldn't respond. Trevor shifted uncomfortably in his chair, not meeting my eyes. "That's completely false," I finally said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I had a mild stroke 2 years ago. My doctor has consistently confirmed that my cognitive function is normal." Mr. Donovan looked between us, clearly sensing he'd stepped into a more complicated situation than Isla had described. "Perhaps we should reschedule when things are calmer," he suggested, gathering his papers. "There's no need to reschedule," I said. "I have no intention of discussing my financial affairs with you at any time, Mr. Donovan." Isla stood up, flustered. "Mom, you're being ridiculous. We're trying to help you." "By claiming I'm mentally incompetent? By lying to an attorney about my health?" Mr. Donovan cleared his throat. "Mrs. Wilson, would you be willing to undergo a cognitive assessment, just to establish a baseline?" "I already have an appointment scheduled with my neurologist for exactly that purpose," I replied, grateful for Judith's foresight. "The results will be sent to my attorney." "Your attorney?" Isla's voice rose an octave. "Since when do you have an attorney?" "Since I realized I needed protection from my own daughter." The words hung in the air, heavy and irrevocable. Trevor stood up and escorted Mr. Donovan to the door, murmuring apologies. When he returned, his face was grim. "That was humiliating," he said to Isla. "You told me he was coming to discuss estate planning, not guardianship." "What was I supposed to do?" Isla snapped. "She's about to throw away everything we've worked for." "It's not yours to lose," I said quietly. "It never was." Isla turned to me, tears welling in her eyes. "How can you do this to us, after everything we've done for you?" "What exactly have you done for me, Isla? Overcharged me for medications I don't need? Taken my Social Security money? While I cook and clean for myself? Made me feel like a burden in your home?" Trevor stepped between us, hands raised placatingly. "Let's all calm down. Norma, maybe you should rest. It's been a stressful day." The suggestion that I needed to rest after being ambushed with an attorney was the final straw. "I'm not a child, Trevor, and I'm not going to be manipulated or gaslighted in this house any longer." I turned and walked upstairs to my room, where I began packing my essentials into a small suitcase. I didn't have many belongings here. Most of my things were still in storage or at my house. As I folded a sweater, there was a soft knock at the door. "Grandma?" Kyle's voice was hesitant. "Can I come in?" "Of course, sweetheart." He slipped inside, closing the door behind him. His eyes widened at the sight of my half-packed suitcase. "Are you leaving?" "Just for a little while," I said, not wanting to worry him. "I'm going to stay with my friend Judith until things settle down." Kyle sat on the edge of the bed, his lanky frame hunched with worry. I heard everything, about the lawyer and stuff. He looked up at me, his young face troubled. "Mom's wrong, isn't she, about you being confused?" "Yes, she is," I confirmed gently. He nodded, as if he'd already known the answer. "I heard them talking last night. About the lake house they want to buy with your money. Mom said they deserved it after putting up with you for 2 years. Though his words hurt, I wasn't surprised. "Thank you for telling me the truth, Kyle. I saved up some money from my summer job," he said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a crumpled wad of bills. "It's only $87, but you can have it if you need it." Tears pricked my eyes as I looked at my grandson's earnest face and the small offering in his hand. In that moment, he showed more compassion and understanding than his mother had in years. "That's very kind of you," I said, gently closing his fingers back around the money. "But you keep it. I'll be just fine." "Promise you'll still see me? Even if you and Mom are fighting?" "I promise," I said, pulling him into a hug. "Nothing could keep me away from you." After Kyle left, I called Judith and asked if I could stay with her for a few days. She agreed immediately. When my taxi arrived, I carried my suitcase downstairs to find Isla waiting in the foyer, arms crossed. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded. I'm staying with Judith for a while, I replied, setting my suitcase down. I think we all need some space. So you're running away instead of dealing with this like an adult? I almost laughed at the irony. Isla, I'm not the one who tried to have my family member declared incompetent rather than having an honest conversation. Fine, she said, her voice hard. Go stay with Judith, but don't come crawling back when you realize you can't manage on your own. I raised you by myself after your father died, I reminded her quietly. I think I can manage just fine. The next few days at Judith's peaceful condo were healing. We caught up on each other's lives, and she introduced me to her tight-knit circle of friends, most of them vibrant, independent women in their 60s and 70s who had created fulfilling lives after retirement. One evening, as we shared a bottle of wine on her balcony, I confessed my deepest fear. What if Isla's right? What if I can't manage on my own anymore? Judith scoffed. Norma, in the 3 days you've been here, you've reorganized my kitchen, figured out why my Wi-Fi kept dropping, and made the best lasagna I've ever tasted. You're more capable than most people half your age. The next morning, I had my neurological assessment. Dr. Patel was thorough, testing my memory, reasoning, and cognitive function. When we finished, she smiled warmly. Mrs. Wilson, your cognitive function is excellent. There's no medical reason you cannot make your own financial and personal decisions. Relief washed over me. Would you be willing to put that in writing for my attorney? Already done, she said, handing me a sealed envelope. I've detailed my findings and my professional opinion that you are fully competent. Armed with this documentation, I met with Judith's colleague, Martin Green. After reviewing my situation, he drafted a letter to Isla and Mr. Donovan, making it clear that any guardianship attempt would be vigorously contested with substantial medical evidence of my competency. This should put an end to that particular threat, Martin said, signing the letter with a flourish. Now, let's talk about protecting your assets once your house sells. As I left his office, my phone rang. It was Patricia, my real estate agent, with exciting news. I had 3 offers on my house, all above asking price. The highest was from a young family who had fallen in love with the garden I'd tended for decades. They said your roses are what sold them on the house, Patricia told me, her voice warm with approval. They want to preserve them, somehow, knowing that my beloved roses would be cared for by a young family made the sale feel right. I accepted their offer on the spot. When I returned to Judith's condo, there was an unexpected visitor waiting. Trevor. I came alone, he said quickly, noticing my apprehensive expression. Isla doesn't know I'm here. We sat in Judith's living room, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Trevor looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. I owe you an apology, Norma, he began. I should have spoken up when Isla started making plans for your house. I should have stopped her from contacting that attorney. I studied my son-in-law's face, searching for sincerity. Why didn't you? He sighed heavily. Because it was easier not to, because I was hoping we could use that money too. He met my eyes directly. It was wrong. I see that now. What changed your mind? Kyle, he admitted. He confronted us after you left, asked us how we could treat his grandmother like a bank account instead of a person. Trevor's voice cracked slightly. Out of the mouths of babes, right? I felt a surge of pride for my grandson. He's a good boy. Better than we deserve, maybe. Trevor hesitated, then continued. I came to tell you that I support your decision to sell your house. And to warn you that Isla isn't taking this well. She's talking about contesting the sale somehow. She has no legal grounds, I said, glad for Martin's reassurance on this point. I know, but she's not thinking rationally right now. He stood to leave, then paused. Kyle misses you. He'd like to visit, if that's okay. I'd like that very much. After Trevor left, I sat thinking about my unexpected allies in this difficult time. Judith with her unwavering friendship, Kyle with his simple honesty, and now perhaps Trevor, finding his conscience at last. I wasn't alone in this battle, and for the first time in years, I felt truly hopeful about my future. 3 weeks after accepting the offer on my house, I stood in the empty living room where I had raised Isla, where Harold and I had shared our brief but happy marriage. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if relieved of the weight of memories. "Are you okay?" Judith asked, touching my arm gently. I nodded. Just saying goodbye. We walked through each room one last time, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. In the master bedroom, I paused by the window that overlooked my rose garden, now legally the property of the young couple who would be moving in next week. "They promised to take care of the roses," I said, more to myself than to Judith. "I know," she replied. "That's a good sign. They'll respect the home you created here." Downstairs, I handed my keys to Patricia, who gave me a thick envelope in return. "Congratulations, Mrs. Wilson," she said warmly. "The funds have been transferred to your account as well, but here's the final paperwork for your records." In the car, Judith glanced at me. "Ready for the next chapter?" I took a deep breath. More than ready. The next morning, I signed the lease. On my new apartment in Silver Oaks, a community for active seniors. It wasn't the sterile nursing home Isla had threatened me with when I first mentioned moving out. Instead, it was a vibrant community of people my age who were living independently, but enjoyed the security and social aspects of having neighbors nearby. My one-bedroom apartment was on the second floor, with a small balcony overlooking a courtyard garden. The kitchen was compact but modern, and the living room had large windows that filled the space with light. It wasn't my house, with its decades of memories, but it felt right for this new phase of my life. With Judith's help, I moved. In the essentials I'd kept in storage and purchased a few new pieces of furniture. Kyle came to help, excited about setting up my new television and showing me how to use the community's Wi-Fi. "This place is cool, Grandma," he said, looking around appreciatively. "Way better than our guest room." I smiled, watching him arrange my books on the new shelves. "I think so too. Has Mom seen it?" My smile faded. "No, she hasn't returned my calls." Kyle's expression turned serious. "She's really mad about the house money. I heard her telling Dad that you owe them for taking care of you. I paid your mother $1,200 every month to stay in her guest room," I reminded him gently. "And I cooked dinner most nights and did my own laundry." "I know," he said. Dad tried to tell her that too. After Kyle left, I sat on my new sofa, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and allowed myself a moment of sadness. Despite everything, Isla was still my daughter, the little girl I had raised alone, the young woman whose graduation I had attended. With tears of pride. How had we come to this impasse? My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello? Mrs. Wilson? This is Roger Kent from Sunnydale Retirement Village. Your daughter Isla asked us to contact you about our assisted living options." I felt a surge of indignation. Even now, Isla was trying to control me, to push me into a facility I neither needed nor wanted. "Mr. Kent," I said firmly, "I appreciate your call, but I've just moved into a new apartment at Silver Oaks. I'm not interested in assisted living." "Oh," he sounded surprised. "Your daughter indicated you were having trouble living independently." "My daughter was mistaken," I replied. "I'm perfectly capable of living on my own, as my doctor will confirm." After ending the call, I sat fuming for several minutes. Then I called Martin Green and explained the situation. "This is harassment," he said. "I'll send another letter making it clear that any further attempts to interfere with your living Arrangements will have legal consequences. The next day, I had my first visitor at Silver Oaks, Trevor. He stood awkwardly in my doorway, a small plant in his hands. "Housewarming gift?" he explained, offering it to me. "It's a peace lily. The guy at the nursery said they're hard to kill." "Thank you," I said, taking the plant and stepping aside to let him in. "Would you like some coffee?" He nodded, looking around the apartment with obvious surprise. "This is nice, really nice." "Did you expect me to be living in squalor?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Trevor had the grace to look embarrassed. "Honestly, I don't know what I expected. Isla has been saying you're going to blow through your money and end up in some terrible place. But," he gestured at my apartment, "this is nicer than our first place was." I handed him a mug of coffee. "That's because I'm not blowing through my money. I've invested most of it, actually. This place is comfortable and affordable." We sat at my small dining table, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. "Isla tried to get me into assisted living," I said finally. Trevor sighed. "I know. I told her not to, but she wouldn't listen. She's convinced you need supervision." "What I need is respect," I countered. "Something Isla seems incapable of giving me." "She's scared," Trevor said quietly. "When you sold the house, it was like her safety net disappeared. We've been counting on that money for years, for retirement, for emergencies, for Kyle's college. Without it, we're just—" He trailed off, looking into his coffee. "Normal," I finished for him. "You're just normal people who need to live within their means, like everyone else." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, and that's terrifying for Isla. She grew up watching you struggle after her dad died. I think she's always been afraid of ending up in that same position." For the first time, I felt a glimmer of understanding. Isla had been 8 when Harold died, old enough to sense the financial strain, but too young to understand why I sometimes cried at night over unpaid bills. Had that childhood insecurity grown into this desperate need for financial control? "I never wanted Isla to struggle the way I did," I said softly. "But that doesn't give her the right to take my security away." "I know," Trevor replied, "and I've tried to tell her that, but she's not ready to hear it yet." As he was leaving, Trevor paused at the door. "Kyle wants to know if he can stay over sometime. He misses you." "I'd like that," I said. "He's welcome anytime." Over the next few weeks, I settled into a comfortable routine at Silver Oaks. I joined a book club that met in the community room, started taking water aerobics classes at the pool, and even befriended my neighbor Eleanor, a retired librarian with a wicked sense of humor. Kyle visited every weekend, sometimes staying overnight on my pull-out sofa. Isla remained distant, ignoring my calls and texts. I sent her a card with my new address and phone number just in case, but received no response. The silence hurt, but I refused to let it overshadow the new life I was building. 1 month after moving in, I received a letter from Martin. The retirement village incident had been the last attempt by Isla to interfere with my independence. Martin's stern warning about potential legal action had apparently made an impression. That evening, as I sat on my balcony enjoying the sunset, my phone rang. It was Isla. "Hello?" I answered, my heart racing. "Mom." Her voice was tight, controlled. "I need to talk to you about something important." "I'm listening," I said cautiously. "Not over the phone. Can we meet tomorrow? There's a coffee shop near where you're living now, the Brewing Pot." "I know it," I said. "What time?" 11, she replied, and hung up without saying goodbye. I sat holding the phone, a mixture of hope and apprehension swirling in my chest. What did Isla want? Was this an olive branch, or another attempt to control me? Whatever tomorrow would bring, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the vulnerable woman who had sat silently at that dinner table, absorbing the hurt of being called another mouth to feed. I was stronger now, more confident in my worth and my rights. I would listen to what Isla had to say, but I would not compromise my hard-won independence. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I made a silent promise to myself. No matter what happened with Isla, I would continue building this new life I had created. A life where I was valued not for what I could provide, but for who I was. The brewing pot was busy when I arrived, the morning rush of students and professionals grabbing coffee before work or class. I found a quiet table in the corner and ordered a chamomile tea, my stomach too knotted for anything stronger. At precisely 11, the bell above the door jingled, and Isla walked in. She wore a tailored blazer and pencil skirt, her work clothes, and her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and a tightness around her mouth that reminded me of how I used to look during the hardest years after Harold died. Our eyes met across the cafe, and for a moment I saw uncertainty flicker across her face. Then she straightened her shoulders and walked toward me. "Mom," she said stiffly, sitting down opposite me. "Hello, Isla," I replied. "You look tired." She waved away my concern. "I'm fine, just busy with work." The waitress came by, and Isla ordered a black coffee. We sat in awkward silence until her drink arrived. "How's Kyle?" I asked finally, unable to bear the tension. "He's fine. Getting good grades." She took a sip of her coffee. "He misses you." "I miss him too, though he visits quite often." Isla's lips thinned. "Yes, Trevor told me." Another silence fell between us, heavier than the first. "You wanted to talk about something?" I prompted gently. Isla set her cup down with deliberate care. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "All right." She took a deep breath. "Did you sell the house because of what I said at dinner that night? About you being another mouth to feed?" I considered my answer carefully. "That was part of it," I admitted. Hearing those words from my own daughter hurt deeply, but it was more than that. It was realizing that you saw me as a burden, not as your mother. It was discovering that you were controlling my medications and taking my money while planning to use my house for your lake cabin. Isla flinched as if I'd slapped her. "How did you—" "Kyle overheard you and Trevor talking," I said, and I checked with my pharmacy and doctor. She had the grace to look ashamed, staring down at her coffee. "Why did you want to meet, Isla?" I asked directly. She looked up, and to my surprise, there were tears in her eyes. "We're losing the house." "Mom? What?" "We can't make the mortgage payments anymore. The bank is foreclosing." Her voice was bitter. "Turns out we were living beyond our means, just like you said." I sat back, shocked. "Isla, I'm so sorry." "Are you?" she challenged, anger flashing through her tears. "If you hadn't sold your house, we could have—" "Could have what?" I interrupted. "Taken my money to solve your financial problems?" "That was never going to happen, Isla. My house was not your emergency fund." She wiped at her eyes angrily. "You don't understand. We have debts. The new car, Kyle's private school tuition, the renovation we did last year." "Those were your choices," I said gently. "Not mine. You always lived so frugally," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Clipping coupons, buying secondhand clothes, never taking vacations. I swore I wouldn't live like that. I wanted more for Kyle than you gave me." Her words stung, but I recognized the fear behind them. "I lived frugally because I had to, Isla. Your father died when you were 8. I was a widow at 35 with a mortgage and a child to raise on a teaching assistant's salary." "I know that," she said defensively. "Do you? Because it sounds like you resent me for not giving you the lifestyle you wanted. But I gave you everything I could. A stable home, a college education, love and support." Ila's eyes welled with fresh tears. And now I'm going to lose my home. Kyle will have to change schools. Everything is falling apart. I felt a complicated mixture of sympathy and frustration. Part of me wanted to reach into my purse, write a check, and solve her problems. But I knew that would only perpetuate the unhealthy dynamic between us. "What are you asking me for, Isla?" I said finally. "Do you want me to give you money to save your house?" She didn't answer directly. "You have all that money from selling your house. You don't need it all." "I do need it," I countered. "It's my retirement fund. It's what will keep me from being dependent on anyone in my old age." "So you're just going to let us lose everything?" Her voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. I took a deep breath. "I'm not going to give you money for a house you can't afford, but I do want to help you, in ways that actually address the real problem." Isla frowned. "What do you mean?" "You're in this situation because of poor financial decisions, not because I sold my house. Giving you money would just be a temporary bandage on a much deeper wound." She started to protest, but I held up a hand. "Let me finish. I won't buy your house for you, but I will help you find a financial advisor who can help you restructure your debts. I'll pay for Kyle's schooling directly, not through you, until he graduates. And I'll help you find a more affordable place to live." Isla stared at me, surprise replacing anger. "You'd do that? After everything? You're still my daughter," I said simply. "I want to help you become financially stable, not dependent on me." She sat back in her chair, processing my offer. "What about Trevor? Have you talked to him about this?" "No. This is the first I'm hearing about your foreclosure." Isla nodded slowly. "He's been taking extra shifts at work, trying to catch up on the payments. He didn't want me to tell you, said we needed to solve our own problems." "Trevor's right about that," I said. "But accepting help to learn better financial habits isn't the same as expecting bailouts." We talked for nearly 2 hours, working through the details of what I was willing to do and what I wasn't. By the time we left the cafe, we had the outline of a plan. It wasn't what Isla had come hoping for, but it was something she could work with. As we stood on the sidewalk preparing to part ways, Isla hesitated, then asked in a small voice, "Can I see where you're living now? Kyle says it's nice." "I'd like that," I replied, surprised and touched by the request. My apartment at Silver Oaks was just a short drive away. As we walked through the lobby, I greeted several neighbors by name. Eleanor was reading in the common area and waved cheerfully. "You've made friends," Isla observed as we rode the elevator to my floor. "Yes. It's a lovely community." Inside my apartment, Isla looked around with obvious surprise. The space was modest but warm and inviting. Framed photos decorated the walls, many of Kyle, but also old pictures of Isla as a child and one of Harold. "And me on our wedding day." "It's homey," she said finally. "Not what I expected." "What did you expect?" She shrugged. "Something institutional, I guess. Cold." "This is my home now," I said. "I've made it my own." Isla wandered to the sliding glass door that led to my small balcony. "You even have space for plants. You always loved gardening." "Just a few pots," I said. "But the roses are coming along nicely." She turned to face me, her expression uncertain. "I was wrong about you, Mom. About a lot of things. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was a start. I know you were scared," I said gently. "Financial insecurity is terrifying. I remember those years after your father died, wondering how I would make ends meet." "I do too," she admitted. "I think that's why I've always been so focused on money. I never wanted to feel that fear again." "But in trying to protect yourself from one fear, you created another situation," I pointed out. "One that wasn't sustainable." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes again. "I'm sorry, Mom, for what I said at dinner that night, for how I treated you, for trying to control you." I stepped forward and took her hands in mine. I forgive you, Isla. But things have to be different going forward. I need you to see me as a person with my own needs and rights, not just as your mother or a source of financial security. I'm trying, she said. It's hard to change how you think overnight. I know. But acknowledging the problem is the first step. We talked a while longer, the conversation easier now that the hardest truths had been spoken. Before she left, Isla asked if I would come to dinner the following weekend. Just family, she assured me. No lawyers, no ambushes, I promise. 6 months later, I sat in the living room of Isla and Trevor's new home, a modest 3-bedroom rental in a pleasant neighborhood not far from Kyle's school. They had downsized significantly, selling the expensive SUV and many of their luxury items to pay down debt. With the help of the financial advisor I'd recommended, they were slowly rebuilding their credit and learning to live within their means. Kyle sprawled on the floor, showing me his latest science project. Isla brought in a tray of coffee and homemade cookies, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. Trevor sat beside me on the sofa, filling me in on his recent promotion at work. We're thinking of buying again in a few years, he told me. Something smaller than the old place, but with a nice yard. Isla wants to try gardening. I glanced at my daughter, who smiled somewhat shyly. Mom's been teaching me. I have tomatoes and herbs on the patio. She's actually pretty good at it, Kyle chimed in. The tomatoes are awesome. As I looked around at my family, imperfect, still healing, but together, I felt a deep sense of peace. The road hadn't been easy, and there were still difficult moments when old patterns threatened to reemerge. But we were learning, all of us, to build relationships based on respect rather than expectation. Later, as Isla walked me to my car, she paused. I'm glad you stood up for yourself, Mom. I didn't see it then, but you taught me something important. What's that? That loving someone doesn't mean owning them, and that real family supports each other's independence, not just their own needs. I squeezed her hand, too moved to speak. That night, back in my apartment at Silver Oaks, I sat on my balcony watching the stars emerge. My small pots of roses were blooming, their sweet scent filling the evening air. On my lap lay a photo album, not of the past, but of the present. Pictures of my new friends at Silver Oaks, of Kyle's weekend visits, of Isla's tentative attempts at gardening. The house of memories was gone, sold to a young family who would create their own history within its walls. But I had built something new and precious from its foundations, not just a home, but a life truly my own. And in that life, there was room for everyone I loved, including my daughter, who was finally learning to see me not as a resource to be managed, but as a woman worthy of respect. It wasn't perfect. Real healing never is. But as I closed the album and breathed in the scent of roses, I knew with certainty that it was enough. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.